We're learning shocking new details about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump over the weekend. A Secret Service spokesman tells CNN that agents did not personally sweep the building where the gunman was perched at Saturday's rally. A source says one of two local counter snipers was supposed to be covering that very building. The Pennsylvania State Police says they were not responsible for that area. The head of the Secret Service, we should know, Kimberly Cheadle, announced this morning that the agency will fully participate in the independent review announced by President Biden. And a senior law enforcement official says the gunman, who was identified as 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, bought 50 rounds of ammo just before that rally. Meanwhile, new video highlights the moments leading up to the shooting. The crowd saw the shooter on the roof and appeared to be getting into position while the former president was talking about immigration to the crowd. Take a listen to what happened next.
Yeah, look, there he is.
Because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
Right on the roof.
It's much tougher than it happens.
You went right on the roof again.
Let's bring in CNN law enforcement analyst Whitney Wild and CNN chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst John Miller. Whitney, let me go to you first. Do we have an answer from the Secret Service as to why they did not sweep this building? I mean, I've covered so many rallies over the years, and these outdoor rallies in particular are very worrisome. And one has to think that that's standard operating procedure, that they would sweep this building.
So here's how this perimeter worked. This building was outside of the perimeter. So our understanding is that the Secret Service, that agency, did not sweep that building, but instead they left that to local law enforcement. So when you consider how perimeters are built out, there are basically concentric circles of responsibility here. So there's sort of a first line and a second line. And in this case, the Secret Service had deferred to the security of that building to local law enforcement. Ultimately, though, the Secret Service is responsible for the totality of that incident. Again, as you pointed out, a source tells CNN that a local counter sniper team was responsible for covering that building. Additionally, I have been told that that building was considered a post. And what that means is that somebody was supposed to be there. Who that person is, we don't know yet. And as I've been talking to other sources about how this would work, there are sort of two scenarios here. So there's a scenario where you actually have somebody assigned to the building, they are not allowed to leave, or you have somebody who's in a roaming post. And these are all the questions that we're trying to figure out. Was this a roaming post? Was somebody supposed to be physically at that building who simply wasn't there? And if so, which agency was responsible for that? And then further, the big question for the Secret Service is, what did they tell local law enforcement to do? Because there seems to be some confusion about roles and responsibilities here. Jim, back to the significance of the sweep. The reality is a sweep very early in the day may not have prevented an incident like this. The reality is this gunman was seen at the perimeter with a firearm outside of the perimeter, later got onto the roof. So, that's later in the day. A sweep that occurs in the morning. The impact of that, it's virtually impossible to say, possibly a moot point. But this is all helpful context in understanding how this day unfolded, where the Secret Service's mind was operationally, and whose responsibility was where in terms of this overall security plan, Jim.
Yeah, John, what's your reaction to all of this? You know all too well about how local law enforcement has to coordinate with Secret Service on protecting in these kinds of situations. But it just seems to me that this is sort of descending into finger pointing. It seems like the Secret Service should have had a handle on this, whether it was left to law enforcement or not.
Well, obviously, looking back in hindsight, it's quite clear that that building was a vulnerability. How do we know that? Because it was exploited as one, and the former president was almost killed. Looking at it from a systemic problem, what Whitney says is dead on, which is the Secret Service owns the inner perimeter. They share the mid-perimeter with local law enforcement. And the outer perimeter usually falls to local law enforcement. Now, when I had the Secret Service in New York, when we were moving President Trump, President Obama, President Biden through the streets, we had 36,000 police officers. So we were able to fill a lot of those gaps. But in a small area like Butler County, local law enforcement is short. The Secret Service is also an undersized agency. And when you look at the number of personnel they had at the Chicago convention prepping, the number of personnel they had in Milwaukee getting ready, the number of personnel they had on a First Lady trip, the people they had with the president That's why they lean so heavily on local law enforcement. And in this case, they're going to be looking at every rally going forward very differently.
Absolutely. You have to wonder, how the Secret Service is going to be able to go forward with these outdoor rallies. And Whitney, the head of the Secret Service, says the agency will fully participate in this independent review that was announced by the president. Who's conducting that? What does that entail? And I have to think there are going to be questions raised as soon as there's a White House briefing over at the White House. The question is going to be asked, does the president still have confidence in this Secret Service director?
That is a major question here, Jim. I spoke with someone shortly after the president announced that he was seeking an independent review. It is not clear that the Secret Service has been formally notified that anybody is conducting this review. That's not to say that there isn't one. I'm just saying that as of my most recent conversation, they had not been notified that a formal one was organized and underway. So it is not clear if this is going to be somebody from the outside. Is this going to be a commission? Is it going to rely on the Department of Homeland Security, Office of the Inspector General? These are all questions we're waiting to find out, Jim.
For more on this, Washington Post reporter Emily Davies joins me now. She's been on the ground in the shooter's hometown of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Emily, this is a real mystery because typically by now in a mass shooting or an event like this, we know a whole lot more about the shooter's motive, but that seems to be kind of a mystery at this point. What have you been able to learn?
Yeah, that's right. People here are really shocked. It's a small community. A lot of people have heard of him, but people who went to school with him describe him as quiet, and everyone is sort of glued to these TV screens all over town trying to figure out how this person existed so close by without any real obvious sign of trouble.
And how is the community responding? I mean, obviously, everybody must still be in shock.
Yeah, everyone is really in shock. It's that line that you never think this is going to happen in your town, and then you wake up in the morning and you see Bethel Park on the TV screen at your favorite diner, and you're stunned. I mean, that's what I've been hearing from people. People here see Bethel Park as a family place. It's easy to raise kids here. People talk about a sort of civility and neighborly spirit, and so having this sort of attention on their community for an incident this violent is really surprising to people.
And what else can you tell us about how the shooter was seen in this community? I mean, it sounds as though people did not see this coming.
No, Bethel Park High School has about 400 people per grade. And so the students who I talked to who were in his graduating class had spent time around him. He was in homeroom with one girl who I spent some good time with. And she described him as a quiet kid, but he was nice to the people who he interacted with. And there was really nothing at school that she said stood out to her as surprising. And she spent at least 20 minutes with him every morning for 4 years. So yeah, people are really surprised. And I think that speaks to some of the mystery of this whole thing.
Yeah, investigators still trying to get to a motive in all of this. Emily Davies with the Washington Post. Thank you very much.